Halloween had always been our thing. The costumes, the haunted houses, the crisp autumn air filled with the scent of pumpkin spice and burning wood. It was a tradition Jessica and I had built together over the years. But this year, something was different. She was different. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. It started small. The late nights, the vague explanations, the way she suddenly pulled away when I touched her, like she had somewhere more important to be. At first, I told myself it was stress. Work had been demanding for both of us, and she had taken on volunteer shifts at the haunted house attraction downtown. Just for fun, she had said. I miss getting scared. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. I noticed the way she stopped looking at me when she talked. The way her phone was always on silent, flipped over on the table, vibrating softly late into the night. The way she avoided my gaze when I asked how her evening went. Tonight was supposed to be different. I had planned something special, a horror movie night, just the two of us. I had even picked up her favorite caramel popcorn. But when I walked into the living room, I found her slipping on her coat, adjusting her scarf in the mirror. You're going out again? I kept my voice even, careful not to sound accusatory. She barely glanced at me. Yeah, the haunted house needs extra volunteers. It's the busiest weekend. I frowned. Jess, it's almost 10 o'clock. She sighed, grabbing her purse. I won't be late. The words felt like a lie. I stood there as the door shut behind her, the sound echoing in the empty house. I could have let it go. I could have stayed on the couch, watched the movie alone, convinced myself that I was imagining things. But something inside me whispered, follow her. And so I did. I wasn't the kind of man who checked up on his wife. I had always believed that trust was the foundation of any strong marriage. But that night, as Jessica disappeared into the cold October air, something inside me snapped into place, a gnawing certainty that I couldn't ignore anymore. I grabbed my jacket, keys, and phone, then followed her. The streets were alive with Halloween energy. Groups of kids in costumes darted between houses, their laughter echoing through the chilly night. Couples strolled hand in hand, their breath visible in the crisp autumn air. But my focus was locked on Jessica's car, a few blocks ahead of me. She wasn't heading to the haunted house the way she usually did. She turned down a back road, leading to the far side of the attraction, the staff entrance. I parked a few spots away and watched as she got out, adjusting her coat. Then, as if waiting for someone, she checked her phone. A few seconds later, a second car pulled up. I clenched my jaw as I watched Brian, her coworker, step out, grinning like a man who knew exactly what he was getting. Jessica smiled back at him, and my stomach twisted in ways I didn't know were possible. She wasn't exhausted. She wasn't volunteering late out of the kindness of her heart. She was meeting him. I gripped the steering wheel, heart pounding. Every fiber of my being told me to get out of the car, walk straight up to them, and call her out for the liar she was. But I held back. Not yet. They moved toward the side entrance of the haunted house, where only staff members were allowed. I got out of my car, keeping my distance, and followed them inside. The haunted house was designed to be disorienting. Narrow hallways, flickering lights, eerie whispers pumped through hidden speakers. But I knew these kinds of places well. Fear is just an illusion. The real horror isn't in the ghosts or the cheap jump scares. It's in betrayal. I moved quietly, sticking to the shadows as I followed them deeper inside. Jessica and Brian weaved through the maze-like structure, past animatronic ghouls and fog-covered corridors, completely unaware that I was right behind them. Then they slipped into a restricted area, a back room labeled staff only, and my worst suspicions were confirmed. I pressed myself against the wall, listening. Are you sure no one will come back here? Jessica's voice was low, playful. Brian chuckled. Positive. I made sure we wouldn't be disturbed. Rage burned through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Storming in would do nothing. I needed something more. I needed proof. I took a slow breath and pulled out my phone. The haunted house was rigged with speakers, strobe lights, and fog machines, all controlled from a single location, the staff's operations booth. And I just happened to know someone who worked there. I scrolled through my contacts and called Chris. He answered after 2 rings. Ethan? What's up, man? I need a favor, I said, keeping my voice low. Chris hesitated. What kind of favor? I peeked around the corner, catching a glimpse of Jessica and Brian laughing in the dim lighting. My grip on my phone tightened, the kind that involves scaring two people half to death. Chris didn't ask for details. He just sighed. Give me 5 minutes. I slipped away, making my way toward the operations booth, where Chris was already at the controls. You want to tell me what's going on? He asked, glancing at the monitors. I stared at the screen, showing the restricted back room. Jessica and Brian stood close, their body language unmistakable. Jessica's cheating on me, I said bluntly. Chris whistled low. Damn. He turned back to the control panel. You want cameras? Deal. What's the plan? I exhaled. I want them to confess. Chris grinned. Oh, I can make that happen. He flipped a switch, and the haunted house transformed. The lights in the back room cut out instantly, plunging Jessica and Brian into darkness. The speakers crackled to life, distorting my voice into something otherworldly. Welcome to your worst nightmare. Jessica, does Ethan know you're here? Jessica screamed. Brian cursed under his breath. What the hell? I watched the monitor as panic set in. Brian tried the door locked. The walls trembled as hidden mechanisms shook the room, making it feel like the entire haunted house was alive. Jessica's breathing was erratic. What's going on? Oh, don't be scared. My voice rumbled through the speakers. I just want to hear the truth. Or would you rather stay trapped here forever? Brian banged on the door. This isn't funny. Chris activated the fog machines, filling the room with thick, swirling mist. Strobe lights flickered violently. Shadows danced against the walls. It was chaos. Then came the whispers. Faint, eerie voices circling them, growing louder. Brian lost it. All right, fine. We've been seeing each other. Just let us out. Jessica gasped. Brian. His voice cracked. He already knows, Jess. Just tell the truth. I leaned into the mic, my voice dropping to a whisper. There it is. The lights slammed back on. The fog cleared, and I stepped into the doorway. Jessica's face drained of color. Ethan. Brian looked like he wanted to disappear. I crossed my arms, taking in the pathetic sight before me. That was easier than I expected. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I can explain. No need. I cut her off. You already did. I tossed a set of papers onto the floor between them. Divorce documents. Signed. Sealed. Ready. Brian's mouth fell open. Dude, shut up, I snapped. You're not even worth my anger. Jessica sobbed. Ethan, please, I smirked. Enjoy the haunted house, Jess. I hope it was worth your marriage. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her to collapse onto the floor, surrounded by nothing but ghosts and regret. As I stepped outside, I took a deep breath of the cold October air, letting the weight of the past finally slip off my shoulders. I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I walked out of that haunted house into the crisp October night, taking the deepest breath I'd taken in years. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for months, maybe longer, was gone. No more doubts. No more suspicions. Jessica had been exposed, and Brian had handed me the confession on a silver platter. I climbed into my car and sat there for a moment, staring at the glow of the haunted attraction in my rearview mirror. People were still laughing, shrieking at the cheap jump scares, completely unaware that inside that house, my marriage had just officially ended. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced down. Jessica. I let it ring. Another buzz. Another call. Then a text. Jessica. Ethan, please. Just talk to me. Then another. Jessica. I know you're angry. I messed up, but we can fix this. I laughed under my breath. Fix this? There was no fixing anything. I had spent months trying to hold together something that had already been broken beyond repair. And now, she was panicking, scrambling to patch the cracks with empty words and crocodile tears. The calls kept coming as I pulled out of the parking lot, but I didn't answer. Let her sit with it. Let her feel what it's like to be ignored, dismissed, abandoned. The way she had made me feel for months. I drove home in silence, the only sound the rhythmic hum of the tires on the pavement. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different, colder. The porch light was on, the one Jessica always insisted we leave lit in case she came home late. How fitting. She wouldn't be coming home tonight. I stepped inside and stood in the entryway, staring at the living room. The couch where we used to sit together. The coffee table where she would leave half-drunk cups of tea. The framed pictures on the wall. Our wedding, vacations, fake smiles that meant nothing now. Without thinking, I walked over and took the biggest frame off the wall. The glass was smooth under my fingers, the image of us on our wedding day frozen in time. I stared at it for a moment, then crack. The frame snapped in two as I bent it in my hands, the glass shattering at my feet. I didn't stop there. One by one, I tore down every trace of her. The smiling pictures, the anniversary gift she had given me, the little decorative nonsense she had filled our home with. Everything that once belonged to us became nothing more than trash. By the time I was finished, the house felt empty. And for the first time, that was exactly how I wanted it. It was past midnight when I finally checked my phone again. 17 missed calls. 9 texts. Jessica, you're being cruel. This isn't like you. Ethan, I'm sorry. Please just let me explain. I tossed my phone onto the couch and poured myself a drink. Let her suffer. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. A loud banging at the front door shattered the silence. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly before walking over. I already knew who it was. I pulled open the door to find Jessica standing there, eyes red and puffy, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She had never looked more pathetic. Ethan, please, she whispered. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. No. She blinked, clearly caught off guard. No. You're not even going to listen? I shook my head. I already listened. Back in that haunted house. Heard everything I needed to hear. She took a shaky breath. I don't love him. I never did. It was just a mistake. I smirked. You don't trip and fall into an affair, Jessica. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a choice. One you made over and over again. She reached for me, but I stepped back, letting the cold night air fill the space between us. Tears welled in her eyes. Ethan, I don't want to lose you. I chuckled, shaking my head. You lost me the second you decided I wasn't enough. She bit her lip, glancing past me into the house. Can I just come in? Please? Just for a minute? I stared at her, at the desperation in her expression. And for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw the real Jessica. Not the woman I thought I knew. Not the wife I had loved, but a selfish, manipulative liar who only cared now because she had lost. I took a deep breath. Then, with the calmest voice I had ever used, I spoke. No, Jessica, you don't live here anymore. Her face crumbled. But I stepped back and shut the door in her face. The last thing I heard before walking away was the sound of her sobbing on the porch. Let her cry. Let her scream. Let her feel everything she put me through. Because I was done. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight filtering through the blinds, casting warm streaks across the floor. For the first time in months, I felt light, like I could breathe again. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at my phone. More texts from Jessica. I didn't open them. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and dialed Dan, my lawyer. Morning, Ethan, he answered. Ready to get this thing moving? I took a sip of coffee, a slow smile spreading across my face. Absolutely. I spent the next few days adjusting to a new reality, one without Jessica's presence lingering in every corner of my life. The house was quieter, but not in a lonely way. More like a weight had been lifted, like I was no longer sharing space with a liar. I no longer waited for her to come home, no longer anticipated an excuse or a lie when she walked through the door. The silence wasn't empty, it was peaceful. Jessica, on the other hand, refused to disappear as easily as I had hoped. She texted constantly, called at random hours, left voicemails that went from apologetic to angry and back again. I ignored all of it. She wasn't worth my breath anymore. But I knew her well enough to understand that she wouldn't just let this go. She would try one last move, one final act of manipulation to pull me back in. And I was right. 3 nights after I had kicked her off the porch, I came home to find her car in the driveway. I gritted my teeth, pulling in beside it. She was sitting on the front steps, hugging her coat around herself like she was some kind of helpless victim. When she saw me, her face lit up in fake relief. Ethan, she breathed, standing up. I was worried you wouldn't come home. I shut the car door and walked past her to the front door. Then you don't know me at all. She followed. Please, just let me talk to you. Just 5 minutes. After that, if you still want me to leave, I'll go. I unlocked the door, but didn't step inside. Instead, I turned to her, arms crossed. Go ahead. Say what you need to say. She swallowed hard. I made a mistake. Yeah, I said flatly. You did. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I miss you. I miss us. I sighed, already tired of the performance. Jessica, we are never going to be us again. Whatever you're about to say, save it. She shook her head, reaching for my hand. Ethan, please, Then she paused. Her entire demeanor shifted. She looked scared. I narrowed my eyes. What? She bit her lip, looking down at the ground. There's something else. Something important. I stared at her, already feeling the setup. Spit it out. She hesitated, then lifted her eyes to mine. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air, heavy, calculated. I didn't react, didn't blink. She let out a shaky breath, her voice breaking. I just found out. I swear, I wasn't going to tell you like this, but I need you to know. Please, Ethan. This changes things. We have to. I laughed. A cold, hollow sound. No, we don't. Her face crumpled. Ethan, that's not my baby, I said, my voice like ice. She gasped. How could you? Because I know you, Jessica. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You're desperate. You've lost everything. You don't have a job. You don't have your affair partner, because he ran the moment things got messy. And now, you're standing here in my driveway, hoping that some miracle lie will make me take you back. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't care. I shook my head, smirking. But you know what the worst part is? Even if the baby was mine, I still wouldn't take you back. She sucked in a breath, stumbling backward. Utan, exhaled sharply. Jessica, I'm done. Do you understand that? I don't believe a single word that comes out of your mouth. And I don't care. We are over. I will never love you again. And whatever mess you're in now, it's yours to deal with. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just silence. She had played her final card, and she had lost. Jessica stood there for a long time, as if hoping I would break, that I would soften. I didn't. I stepped inside the house and shut the door in her face. For the first time, she didn't knock. She didn't scream. She just left, and I never saw her again. The next morning, I met with Dan at the lawyer's office. He pushed the final paperwork across the desk, clicking his pen. Everything's ready. Once you sign this, it's official. I picked up the pen without hesitation. Good. Dan studied me for a moment. You okay? I smirked. Never better. And as I signed the final document, sealing Jessica out of my life forever, I felt nothing but relief. The pen barely made a sound as I signed my name, the last stroke cutting through my past like a blade. Divorced. Just like that. No more Jessica. No more lies. No more pretending. Dan took the papers, giving me a nod of finality. That's it. You're officially a free man. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders, trying to shake off the weight of the last few months. But it wasn't just the months. It was years of being trapped in a marriage that had been rotting long before I ever noticed. The worst part? I'd let it happen. Dan leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're taking this better than most guys. I smirked. I think I mourned this marriage a long time ago. Fair enough, he said, sliding a copy of the finalized papers toward me. She didn't contest anything, which means she either feels guilty or she knows she doesn't have a leg to stand on. I knew Jessica well enough to know that guilt had nothing to do with it. She had probably weighed her options, realized she had no leverage, and decided to cut her losses. It was the first smart decision she had made in months. Thanks, Dan, I said, standing. I appreciate everything. He stood too, shaking my hand. So what's next? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I had spent so much time reacting to Jessica's betrayal, to the unraveling of our marriage. But now, I didn't have to react anymore. I could finally choose what came next. I smiled. Whatever the hell I want. A week after the divorce was finalized, I got another text from Mike. Mike, man, you need to see this. He attached a screenshot, Jessica's social media. I hadn't checked it since everything went down. Honestly, I didn't care. But now, looking at the post, I felt a mix of amusement and absolute certainty that I had dodged a bullet. Jessica had written some long, dramatic caption about growth and lessons learned. But the comment section told the real story. Leah, so you cheated and now you're the victim? Tony, I was at the haunted house that night. That was the funniest thing I've ever seen. Emily, wait, you got caught eyeing the ACT and now you want sympathy? Jake, I bet Brian's regretting it too. I chuckled, shaking my head. Jessica had spent our entire marriage caring about appearances. What people thought of her. How perfect she looked from the outside. And now? Now she was a joke. I didn't expect to see Brian so soon after everything. But fate had a sense of humor. I was sitting at a bar downtown, nursing a whiskey, when I heard his voice behind me. Hey, Ethan. I turned, barely suppressing a smirk. Brian stood there looking rough. Dark circles under his eyes, a tension in his shoulders like he hadn't slept right in weeks. Brian, I said, my tone neutral. What can I do for you? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, man, I know I don't have any right to ask for your time, but can I say something? I gestured to the stool beside me. By all means. He sat, ordering a drink before turning to me. I messed up. I arched an eyebrow. No kidding. He exhaled. I don't even know what I was thinking. Jessica, she came on strong, you know? Said you two weren't happy. That you barely talked. That she was just going through the motions. And I was stupid enough to believe her. I let out a low laugh, shaking my head. And now? He hesitated, gripping his glass. Now I know it was all bull. She played me, man. She never cared about me. The second everything blew up, she tried to blame me. Act like I pressured her. Like it wasn't her idea from the start. I wasn't surprised. Jessica had never been the type to take real responsibility. You and I were never friends, Brian, I said, leaning forward. So don't mistake this for sympathy. But if you think for 1 second that you're the victim in this, you're dumber than I thought. He swallowed hard, nodding. Yeah, I get that. I stood, tossing some cash on the bar. Good luck, Brian. You're gonna need it. Then I walked away, leaving him to sit in the wreckage he had helped create. That night, as I sat on my porch with a glass of whiskey, I realized something. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Jessica. I wasn't replaying our fights. I wasn't analyzing every lie. I wasn't trying to figure out where it all went wrong, because I didn't care anymore. I had spent so much time caught up in the pain, in the anger, in the need for revenge. But now I just wanted to live. I had a future ahead of me, a fresh start, and I wasn't going to waste a second of it. Jessica had made her choice, and now I was finally making mine. The strangest thing about moving on was how quiet it was. No more fights, no more lies, no more late nights wondering where Jessica was or who she was really with. The house felt different now, not empty, just mine. I had spent years sharing my space with someone who had already left me long before she got caught, mentally, emotionally, in every way that mattered. Now, she was gone, and I could finally breathe. But just because I was done with her didn't mean the world was. Jessica's downfall was faster and messier than I expected. The haunted house scandal had spread like wildfire, and since she had spent our entire marriage obsessed with her image, it hit her hard. Friends turned on her. Family distanced themselves. People who had once admired her fake perfection now saw her for what she really was. She had built her life on a foundation of appearances, and now that foundation had collapsed. It started with the texts. First, she tried apologizing again. Then, when I ignored her, she switched tactics. Jessica, Ethan, I don't deserve this. I lost everything. You don't even care, do you? I hope you're happy ruining my life. I didn't respond. Then came the calls from mutual friends who felt the need to check in on her behalf. She's not doing well. One of them, Emily, told me over the phone. She lost her job. Brian won't even speak to her. Her parents are embarrassed. Ethan, she's crashing at a friend's place because she can't afford rent right now. I took a slow sip of my coffee, unimpressed. And what do you expect me to do about it? Emily hesitated. I don't know, just maybe no. My voice was firm. Jessica made her bed. Now she gets to lie in it. Emily sighed. She keeps saying she never meant to hurt you. I let out a short laugh. She just didn't think she'd get caught. The conversation ended shortly after that. I wasn't heartless. I wasn't cruel. But Jessica had spent years putting herself first at my expense. Now, for the first time, I was putting myself first. And I had no regrets. The next time I saw her, she looked small. She showed up at my house one evening, standing on the porch like a stray that had been left out in the cold. I debated not answering, but I was done running from the past. I opened the door. She looked up at me, eyes hollow. "Ethan." I leaned against the frame. "What do you want?" She swallowed hard, gripping her coat tighter. "Can I come in?" "No." Her face flickered with something, shock, then sadness, then acceptance. I don't know what to do anymore. I studied her, this woman I had once loved, who had thrown me away like I was nothing and only came crawling back now that she had nothing left. I felt nothing for her. She let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I know you don't believe me, but I am." I nodded. "Okay." Her brows furrowed. "That's it? What do you want, Jessica?" My voice was even. "Forgiveness? Closure? Me to tell you it's going to be okay." She opened her mouth, then closed it, shaking her head. "I don't know." I exhaled. "Then we have nothing left to say." She stared at me for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Goodbye, Ethan." I didn't reply. I just shut the door. And with that, she was gone. Life moved on. I threw myself into work, reconnected with friends I had lost touch with during my marriage, started actually living again. I found new routines, new hobbies, things Jessica never would have approved of. I traveled for the first time in years, just because I could. And then there was Rachel. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't a grand, dramatic romance. It was simple, easy, like something I didn't have to fight for. We had started as just friends, but over time, it became clear that there was something more. One evening, as we sat at a small outdoor cafe, she tilted her head, studying me. "You're different now." I smirked. "Different how?" She took a sip of her wine. "Lighter. Happier. Like you finally let go of something." I thought about that. About Jessica. About all the years wasted on someone who was never truly mine. About the moment I had finally shut that door and walked away without a second thought. I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "I think I did." The strangest part of life after Jessica was the stillness. There was no more tension, no more suspicion lurking in the back of my mind, no more checking my phone for texts that never came. It was quiet in the best way possible. I had space to breathe again. The first thing I did after the legal battle was officially behind me was take a week off work and go somewhere just for me. No compromises. No considering someone else's schedule. I booked a solo trip to the mountains, a cabin tucked away in the woods where I could wake up and hear nothing but the wind moving through the trees. I hiked. I read books I had put off for years. I sat on the porch every morning with a cup of coffee and watched the sun rise over the peaks. And with every passing day, I could feel the old version of myself slipping away. The man who had spent so long trapped in a marriage that was nothing more than a lie. The man who had let himself become a shadow of what he used to be. That man was gone now, and in his place was someone I actually liked. Meanwhile, Jessica was learning what it meant to live with her own choices. I wasn't keeping tabs on her, but I didn't have to. People loved gossip, and the story of how she had destroyed her own marriage had spread far and wide. It was only a matter of time before someone brought up her downfall in casual conversation. I was having lunch with Mike when her name inevitably came up. "You heard about Jessica, right?" he asked, sipping his beer. I raised an eyebrow. "What now?" Mike leaned back, grinning. "She's bouncing between jobs. No one wants to work with her after what happened. Turns out sleeping with a coworker and getting caught in a haunted house isn't exactly great for the resume." I smirked. Imagine that. Mike wasn't finished. "Brian dished her too. Word is he ghosted her the second he realized she wasn't some exciting secret anymore. She's completely alone, man. No job, no relationship, barely any friends left." I took a slow sip of my drink, letting that sink in. A few months ago, I would have taken satisfaction in that. I would have relished in her downfall, let it fuel some lingering bitterness. But now, I just shrugged. "Not my problem." Mike shook his head, laughing. "Man, you're really over her, huh?" I met his gaze, calm and sure. I was over her the moment I walked out of that courtroom. Life wasn't just about moving on from Jessica. It was about rediscovering myself. I started going to the gym again, something I had neglected when I was too wrapped up in trying to make a broken marriage work. I reconnected with old friends, people I had slowly drifted away from during my years with Jessica. And then there was Rachel. She had been in my life long before my marriage ended. We had met through mutual friends, and while there had never been anything romantic between us before, there was always something easy about talking to her. She didn't walk on eggshells around me like some people did after the divorce. She didn't treat me like I was damaged or needed fixing. She just treated me like me. One night, after a long day at work, she invited me out for a drink. We sat at a rooftop bar, the city lights stretching out below us, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. You seem different, she said, swirling the last of her cocktail in her glass. I raised an eyebrow. Different how? She tilted her head, studying me. Happier. Lighter. I thought about that. About how, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't questioning whether I was enough. I wasn't wondering if the person sitting across from me was keeping secrets. I smirked. Yeah, I think I am. Rachel smiled, leaning back in her chair. So what now? I exhaled, staring out at the skyline. Whatever the hell I want. And for the first time in years, that felt like the best possible answer. I thought I had seen the last of Jessica. Thought she had finally accepted that we were done. But Jessica never knew how to let go. One afternoon, I was at home, finishing up some work, when my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the best of me. I answered. Hello. There was a pause. Then a familiar voice. Ethan? I froze. Jessica. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. What do you want? She hesitated. I just wanted to talk. I frowned. About what? The divorce is done. We have nothing left to discuss. I know, she said quickly. I've been thinking about everything. About how things ended. And I cut her off. Jessica, I don't care. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. I just miss you, Ethan. I let out a humorless laugh. No, you miss what I gave you. Stability. Security. Someone who actually cared. You don't miss me. Her voice cracked. That's not true. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Jessica, listen to me. I don't hate you. I don't think about you. You're just someone I used to know. And that's all you'll ever be. She sniffled. Can't we at least be friends? I clenched my jaw. No, we can't. I hung up, and that was the last time I ever spoke to her. A few weeks later, I was at Rachel's place, helping her open a bottle of wine when she glanced at me. You seem like a guy who doesn't look back. I smirked. That's because I have nothing left to look back at. She held my gaze for a moment, then smiled. Good. We sat on her couch, the warm glow of the city outside her window, and I realized something. I wasn't just moving on. I had already moved. I had left the past exactly where it belonged. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.